So, with all due respect to Jesse, I mean, it's just utter nonsense. One of the things here is that I'm not just an infrastructure guy, but I've also been an application developer guy, and I've, supported SaaS applications, deployed them, maintained them, on Amazon and other places. And the thing is that, I get this sort of weird rap that I'm like, pimping the AWS APIs, which I'm not. I'm pimping the AWS architecture, which is actually very similar, or if not the same thing as the Google architecture. And at the last OpenStack Summit, I had a very, very detailed rundown on what I mean by hybrid cloud and what I mean by cloud interoperability. And the problem is that people get all tied around the APIs like, that's one of 6 elements that I define as being important. The other ones are like performance guarantees, SLAs, and availability and uptime, total cost of ownership, the behavioral compatibility, and so on. So I don't know if people remember, but there was something called IPsec in the 90s, still out there today, obviously, and people would build IPsec VPNs. And when IPsec came out, none of the VPN vendors were compatible with each other, even though they all had the same standard. Standards don't come from like protocols or software, things like that. They come from actually taking a system and modeling it and having testability around, is the system behave the way that we expect it to? And so that's what we need. And so you look at something like the idea of having an abstraction, and it just hides the underlying cloud. What if Cloud A and Cloud B have 10x different performance? Right? Your abstraction isn't going to do shit for performance variations. It's not going to do shit for availability variations, right? Thank you, Josh. So the problem is that people get really confused. They're like, whoa, it's just infrastructure, and we're going to abstract it away, and we're going to have this magical platform as a service thing, and you stick your apps on it, you never have to worry about it again. And that's like saying that like roads don't have to have standards and the same signage, and that railways don't have to have the same lines, and that carriers don't have to use the same protocols for your mobile phone to work. It's just not the way it works. Imagine this. You've got a whole bunch of electrical devices in front of you. Some of them take 3 volts DC, 12 volts DC, 9 volts DC, 120 volts AC, 208 AC, 50 hertz, 60 hertz, blah, 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 blah. Now go tell the power company that all of those things need to have their own native power delivered directly to them, right? The power company is now screwed. Their cost of delivery of power is now 10x. The reality is that we need a standardized system, a standardized platform, both for public and private cloud, that is the same fundamental infrastructure, that has the same performance guarantees, same SLA and availability guarantees, most of the same APIs, and the same behavioral compatibility that we can test and show that private cloud and public cloud operate and behave in the same way. And then you can put the applications on them and move them around and get true application portability. But without that, it's just people sort of saying, oh, stick your application in Docker and it goes everywhere. No. That's not the way it works. That's not the way it works.
We're so far away from ever getting to that point. And yes, I agree that would be a nice.
We're not.
We are. That would be a nice thing to have. But in reality, if I go to Europe, I can take my power cord and I can plug it in. And there are transformer boxes that will allow me to take something that talks a different language and put it in the middle, and that will give me a compatible power source. And that is what I think we need today, whether it be Cloud Foundry or it be abstraction engines.
When I first started doing networking in the late 80s and then going into the early 90s, there was TCP/IP had not won. There were people who had just AppleTalk networks and other people who had IPX networks, and that shit just didn't work out, right? We had all these crazy gateways between them, and it was really messy. And what wound up happening is that TCP/IP won, and the idea that Amazon isn't driving a new standard, isn't the de facto standard, the gold bar or the bar that we said for everybody else. I mean, that's just crazy.
I agree. As day to day, I do not build infrastructure other than needed for the apps. We build apps, and the cloud is still somewhere in Virginia.
Hopefully you're running in 2 zones, though.
you would be surprised how often not. Like, it is still a trade-off. And for a lot of consumer apps, the downtime of EC2 East is good enough. So when I say somewhere in Virginia, I do mean all of the Amazon network, but sometimes it is literally just Virginia. That said, we are a long way from these abstractions we're talking about. There's a lot of magic and hand-waving going on about what will be in the future, but there's a big gap between the Heroku, which has this closest, hey, it's just abstracted computing and just push it up, till you're at the scale where you're building your own systems in EC2, and then it's not abstracted. No. I know what my data store is. I know what language it talks, how it performs, how it needs to be tuned. There are no data store abstractions that don't have trade-offs. Whether you're using React or Postgres or some other worse choice.
Totally. And you look at Heroku, they can't even put it on another cloud.
Yeah.
I've talked to them before. They can't even move it.
And for application development, it's not like you have this magic compute and you have this magic storage. No, you have very specific things that are replicating what it was in the hardware world. We're a long way away from magic storage with no trade-offs.
So if you go back to the enterprise applications that we're talking about rewriting here, most of them aren't going to be the Netflix of the world. I think there are certain applications like Netflix that have a scale where writing to the native APIs makes sense. But the majority of enterprise applications that are being rewritten may have 3,000 or 5,000 enterprise users, or may have 30,000 users. And those types of applications can be written on top of something like Cloud Foundry and can be deployed multi-cloud today. It's not a fantasy. We've got customers doing this today.
No, that's
and that
not. There's
competitively
there's
exists.
no question that Cloud Foundry has a place, but Cloud Foundry is like Java Containers 2.0. If you went and you said, okay, we're going to redo WebLogic and WebSphere for multi-language, and we're going to do it in an environment where the underlying infrastructure they run on is dynamic and not static, voila, you have Cloud Foundry. But that only solves one set of problems. If you need a high level of custom, you're not going to run Netflix on Cloud Foundry, right?
Correct.
So there's a spectrum of solutions that you have here, from fully baked applications all the way down to do-it-yourself, Chef, Puppet, Ansible, so on, and everything in between. And Cloud Foundry fits one clean niche. There's no doubt about it, but it's not going to abstract everything.
Let's talk about the bulk of the workloads in the middle market and the enterprise market today that are being translated from legacy implementation to new architectures. The bulk of those applications, call it 80%, will be written in a way that they can sit on top of something like Cloud Foundry. I'm not saying Cloud Foundry is the solution. I'm saying that type of technology is the solution. These applications can reside there, they will reside there, and that will provide the support for multi-cloud capabilities.
Oh, so you mean Heroku?
I mean Heroku, but I mean Heroku that has the capability to run. The customer we've got today, they run dev test on Amazon. They run production on OpenStack on Blue Box Cloud. They've got the capability, if Blue Box Cloud doesn't have a region, they've got the capability to go and put it on top of another Amazon region for production, or to put it on a Google region for production. It's that level of abstraction that they could say, I can write my application to one API, and that API is a software stack that has compatibility across a globally distributed set of different compute engines. That's the power of multi-cloud, and that's the power of platform as a service.